I think it's about time we'll get started. Let's let the record show that it's 7:18. I love the way that sounds. And we're officially starting our meeting of the Board of Adjustment. We have two cases on our calendar tonight. Before we start doing that, we have to call to order our members to make certain that we have a quorum for the board. And with that in mind, I'm just going to ask us to go right around and announce your name and the fact that you're here.
Blair Weaver, here.
Charles Roberts, present.
Robert Logue, present.
Doug Deptouch, present. Now, with that in mind, let us stand up and let us salute our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. One thing I'd like to mention to everybody who's here is that there are two requests for variances by the board. For the board to give a variance request approval, we need to have 4 out of 5 members voting in favor of the variance. Unfortunately, tonight, there are only 4 members on the board available. Now, I'm pointing that out because if you would like to have the case heard this evening, we will be happy to hear the case. But if we do hear the case, you basically will need to get 4 out of 4 to approve. And I'm mentioning that because, again, if your case is coming up, you may say, you know what, I don't like those odds. Why don't we put it off and we'll reschedule and meet again whenever. That is your right. That is perfectly fine. Unfortunately, we had a very difficult job. Usually we have a couple of extra people sitting by ready to go, but for whatever reason, this time was a tough time. Maybe everybody's exhausted from the carnival, I'm not sure. But whatever the reason, we don't have the usual attendance. So let me mention that. Let me also mention that we have tonight 2 very different cases before us. Very different circumstances, very different requests. And with that in mind, what I would like to propose to the board right here, right now, is that instead of following our usual order of having citizens to be heard or discussion for everybody, that what we do is we separate things. And those who are here to discuss and talk about one case, talk at that time, and then those who are here to talk about a second case, talk later on. That way we're not hearing all of our citizens talking and then trying to sort out a little bit later on who said this about that and who wants what about that. In order to do that, I do need an approval. I need a motion and a second. I do think that would facilitate matters, keep us organized, expedited, and help us to do a good job. Again, it's not that you won't get a chance to be heard. We'll just kind of do it in an organized fashion as opposed to mixing the 2 hearings together. Can I get a motion?
I make a motion that we hear each item individually.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, anybody opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, with that in mind, the first item on our agenda tonight concerns a hearing, a request for a variance by Mr. Cesar Hernandez, and I'm just going to read the request here. It's a public hearing to give all interested persons the right to appear and be heard on a request by Cesar Hernandez for a variance to Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 98, Zoning, Article 2, District Regulations, Section 98-72, Old Town Holosis Special District authorizing an encroachment in the required residential buffer zone of 30 feet or, parenthesis, or a street plus 10 feet, close parentheses, where any Old Town Helotes sub-district abuts an existing single-family residential district, parentheses, R1, close parentheses, two-family residential district, parentheses, R2, close parentheses, and mobile home district, parentheses, R3, close parentheses, for Hacienda de Rio, Development Building 2 and Building 5, located at 14743 Old Bandera Road, Helotes, Texas, 78023. More particularly described as BCAD property ID number 1046345. That will be the item we'll be discussing first. I have here on my list 4 citizens who wish to be heard. Unfortunately, I don't know who wants to be heard on this one, so I will just ask here again, Robert, you want to be heard on item number 3. Robert is a citizen in addition to a public servant. I have a Philip Mania. Is that the first item or the second item? Is that?
My statement, I feel the same about both.
No, I can't, we got to do this in order. Is that concerning the Hernandez request?
Correct.
Okay, sir. If you could just hold for a second, please sit back down. Jason Webster? Hernandez? Okay. Harriet Hood?
I'm not sure because I'm not, I don't know which is pertaining to my house.
Can y'all put the map up?
Right, if y'all can,
What's your address, ma'am?
14488 Antonio Drive.
I believe she's referring to the
That would be the Hernandez request. That's what I believe also.
No, I think that would be item 3.
Yeah, that would, no, that'd be item 2.
I think she
Wait.
put in for item 3. Because Antonio is under item 3, as closest.
You sure?
You sure? We can find out here as soon as I put the map up.
Okay, yeah, let's get the map up so we can be absolutely positively certain if that's okay.
This is for Hernandez?
Yes.
Hernandez.
Hernandez as well? Okay. Okay, so number 2. Can we get their map up there, Rick? And if not, we will, anybody who's confused is welcome to come up here, take a look at one of our pieces of paper, and see for certain.
This is Antonio Drive right here,
Yes,
and this is the subject property.
that is the subject.
My house is right beside it.
Okay, so you would be here to discuss the Hernandez. Thank you very much. And again, I just want to clarify, make sure we get everything done right and proper. With that in mind, we'll have the citizens to be heard on the Hernandez request. And why don't we just start right here? I have a Harriet Hood. We've clarified who you are and that you're here for that property. Might I ask you to come forward, please, and identify your name and address for the records, please.
Oh, okay. I'm Harriet Hood, and I live there at 14488 Antonio Drive. We've had that place since 1958.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not exactly sure how much would be directly pertaining to exactly where my property line is. I have my property line is above where the, there is a, we have the creek, and then we have, some land that is, above the creek.
You mean on the opposite side of the creek?
And then we have, that I own several feet on that, the top of that, bluff or whatever it is.
Okay,
I'm not sure exactly how many feet, I would say maybe 10 feet,
okay.
but, I just don't know how far, the building would be or whatever is happening.
Okay.
That would,
Well, we'll probably be discussing exactly what'll be happening in a little bit.
Okay.
Might I ask you, and again, if you don't feel like you've had proper opportunity to address your concerns, we try to be very flexible here, we try to be very fair.
Sure.
The only thing I'd ask, if you do sit down and there's something you absolutely positively feel like sharing later on, just please raise your hand. We kind of keep a certain set of decorum going here.
Sure.
But in essence, it looks like from your point of view here on this form, you are neutral concerning that request.
I don't know. I would have to have more information of what's going to be put there and how it's going to affect my, my feeling that I'm living in a rather quiet area, and I'm not sure if what's going to be put there. I don't know exactly what's, you know, is the building, what is the building? The building is what?
There are gonna be a number of buildings that are going to be put there.
Okay.
Is it easy for us to get that up on the screen, Rick? Just to give Ms. Hood here a sense of exactly what's going on? And again, that is the proposed use for the property.
Where's Antonio Drive?
Antonio Drive would be, Ms. Hood's property, to the best of my understanding, would be just south of, would have been okay,
Antonio Drive is right here, Mr.
Okay.
Weaver. This is the property in question, this is Old Bandera Road.
Okay.
The shops,
How would people obtain access to that piece of property?
Right, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how would people be,
they will access it off of Old Bandera Road next to the shops at Old Town Helotes, where Wine 101 is.
okay, so it'd
What
come
kind
off
of
Old
buildings
Bandera.
will they
There'd
be
be a
in?
long driveway, okay. And has construction started on this?
no construction has started. However, the matter has been brought before P and Z, and has also been brought before City Council. And as best I recall, Rick, both P and Z and City Council are in favor of granting the variance.
Yes, sir.
They've approved the architectural drawings for substance regarding the planning and zoning's
Yeah,
purview.
Yeah, when we get through the public hearing, I was gonna make a,
Okay.
You'll make a comment, all right, we'll hold on that then. But P and Z has already reviewed this, and again, we're talking about an area that's a special use area that's specifically part of quote-unquote Old Town Helotes. So the requirements for building there, both architecturally, zoning, et cetera, are very different than a little further down the road on Bandera Road or whatever.
There's an architectural rendering, I think, Rick. I don't know if it's best to pull that up as part of the open discussion, or if you'd rather wait until the meeting. It's,
I can.
You know what, why don't we, okay, there's a property rendering right there. To
Okay.
give you an idea of what it's going to look like.
So, let's go back a little bit. Can we?
Guys,
Now,
we're
is
having
this-
one
is-
meeting here, please. I appreciate it, and I know we're a little bit confused, and we're gonna clarify the confusion, but the best way to do that is, I've experienced one question at a time, so thank you. I appreciate that.
So what is going to be going on? I'm concerned about noise.
This will be a mixed-use facility, so there will be residential in the second stories, and there will be business, retail, and office space on the first floors.
Right. I can't say that I would be for that. We've moved out here to be in a quiet area. I'm already experiencing loud band playing up until 2 a.m. in the morning. I really can't say that I'm for that.
Unfortunately, Ms. Hood, I want to give you all the time you need, but we're not here tonight to discuss whether or not Floors Country Store should close at 11 or 12 or 1. It is strictly about this particular case, and our comments have to be focused on this specific case.
Okay, now, if it's going to be apartments, they were going to be several different things that are being done in different apartments. I can't say that I'm so far apartments right next to my house. I just don't feel
So
like
shall we
it's a
put you
great
down as a
thing.
no?
Yeah, let's put it as a no. I'm sorry I feel
No,
that
that's-
way, but we're here for silence. We're here for comfort. We're not here for selling things. And whatever. That's my,
Very good. Thank you so much. I appreciate
I
it.
just have one question.
Sure.
How long have you lived here?
1957.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next person, I'm just pulling these up randomly, Jason Webster.
Can you pull the map up? I'm gonna try to, what was your last name again? I'm one of your neighbors. Okay, so, real quick,
Sorry, excuse me, before you get started, could you give me your name and your address for the records, please?
yeah, Jason Webster, 14671 number 4, Old Bandera Road.
Thank you, sir.
So, yes, ma'am. Okay, so what they're asking me, my idea, real quick, I'll just so she knows.
No, please, go ahead, sir.
This is the property, there's gonna be 2 buildings, 2 and 5, right? By law, they have to stay off of this property line, which is yours, it runs on top of the bluff.
Right.
What they're asking is to not have to abide by the law and come over closer to the property line.
I see.
So, from what I know, they've already approved what's gonna be put in here. But they wanna come closer to the property line, and I can see your point saying no, that you want them to stay away from the property line. So,
Mr. Webster, could you point out your property in relation to this one?
right here.
Okay.
And my sister's, it's right here was Kazia. Okay, so she said she's been there since 57, and we've been there since 64.
64, sir?
1964, my family bought that. Just so you know, the first red light was inside 410 at that time. But anyways, so we've got this little spot back in here, and I grew up there, she grew up there. Now she owns the house that my mom raised us in, right? But this whole time, we've been back there in this little honey hole. And you can't see another house from our house where we grew up. You can't see any neighbors. It's pretty quiet unless Floors Country Store's having something, or Lester's just, has an outside band. So, that being said, and I know I didn't get to tell you about the variance, but we're not real excited about looking over and seeing a 3-story apartment complex sticking up above the tree line all of a sudden. We've had it this way forever, so we're not too tickled about it going in the first place. So apparently this isn't gonna really bother me too much on the back because it's Miss Harris's property line. But I think y'all should take into consideration what she wants. And if she's against the variance, I was neutral. Now that I hear her, I'm gonna have to be against the variance too.
Okay,
'Cause
so
I
I
can
will
see her
mark you
point.
down now as being opposed to the variance.
Yes, sir.
Does anybody on the board have any other questions?
We have a letter from Gary Flowers.
Yes,
who
sir, that's my
is
neighbor.
Completely opposed to it. Is he here tonight?
He's not coming tonight.
Do you know
Yeah.
where his property is on that map?
His property's right here, and this is the Reyes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was that smaller piece of property?
This is Lydia and Balti Reyes right here.
Okay.
Thank you. This is Mr. Flowers.
Okay.
Okay. Do you know how long he's lived there?
He's probably been there almost as long as we have.
Okay. I'm sorry?
81? Okay,
81?
81. Early 80s. Pretty much as long as I can remember.
Okay.
So, and I know he's against it also. So,
Any other questions from the members of the board for Mr. Webster? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next one I have is Philip Mania.
Board members, good evening. Philip Mania, 14743 Old Bandera Road. I happen to own Wine 101 and the shops at, excuse me, at Old Town Helotes. I actually wrote the board a letter. The only reason my name is on the paper is simply in case you guys need to ask me any questions, any further questions. The letter is very self-explanatory, how we feel about it. And that's about it. And obviously, we are pro the development.
Sir, could I ask you to just be a little more specific, simply because I want to enter your testimony into the hearing tonight and not just a letter that would not be good for the records later on. You don't have to read it all, but you can just give us an essence of what your thoughts are.
Okay. Actually, we only have one concern with this. We are pro-development, first and foremost. So we don't see a problem. We don't see it affecting us in any shape, way, or form. The only concern we have is the actual small driveway that, that actually it's on my property. How are, the tenants, the 17 units, the tenants for the business and everything else, how are they going to be able to access it? It's very, very tight. It's probably less than a car and a half, perhaps. It probably needs to be enlarged somehow, some way, and I'm not sure how that's going to be done or whether that has been planned at all. The issue is, on my side of the property, right on the edge of the driveway, we have the main sewer, the main electrical, and 4 or 5 big heritage oak trees. The other side of the driveway, which is actually the Holtz's property and the bluffs at Old Town, there's pretty much nothing on that side. So if we are to expand that driveway, our position is that we would prefer that it expands on the other side versus than on our side, which we would have to undo a lot of infrastructure to accomplish that. That's my position.
Okay, but overall, you are in favor?
Correct.
Assuming none of those changes were made, you would be in favor?
Correct.
Other questions from members of the board?
So when you talk about the driveway, you're talking about the one that goes into Pete's place?
Correct.
Okay, and then you were saying expanding it to your right, that's going,
As you're entering the driveway, on the left of the driveway is basically our property.
Correct.
If you will, all of the businesses.
the cracked mug and so forth.
Correct.
And then as you go farther back, you start running into, there's a heritage oak,
Correct.
right, and that's a very nice tree. And then to your right, there's a fence line. for
Correct.
Malky's.
Correct. Which separates our property from the Holtz's property.
Right. Okay,
Gentlemen, any other questions?
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
you.
I appreciate that. And then I have a Jennifer. And I'm going to ask you to identify yourself, and if you could give me your last name slowly, I'd appreciate it, because I don't write as fast as I used to.
Jennifer Webster,
Webster? Oh, that's good. That's easy.
14671-3, number 3, Old Bandera Road.
Very good. Okay, thank you.
And my brother pointed out that my property is Well, kind of where the creek is, where the two creeks meet, with the little triangle back there. Lydia Reyes asked me to tell you guys that she's against it. She's the small one, the 079. She would share a fence line.
Okay.
242079. I've studied all the schematics of it, and you keep saying it's a mixed-use development because I think apartments aren't allowed in the city of Helotes, I think is from what I understand. But it is what it is. If you call a spade, it is apartments on top. If they have to check out, if they're taking a survey and do you live in a home, a townhome, or an apartment, they would check apartment. Because nobody asks, do you live in an apartment or a mixed-use development? Nobody knows what a mixed-use, it's just semantics, it's an apartment complex. And I was speaking, this is the architect, and we keep talking about 2-story, but there is a 3-story in there from what I understand. From what I've seen of the schematics of it, there's a 3-story. If 2-story is going up to 24 feet, is the 3-story going to go up to 36 feet in Old Town Helotes? And does that really fit Old Town Helotes? I don't think it does. I've been there since birth. I moved away for a while. I have one kid that went through Helotes Elementary. I went through Helotes Elementary. I have another kid that's going to go to Helotes Elementary starting this year. I think it's kind of, I'm just going to say that I'm completely opposed to it. Is this building, what are we saying, 3 and 5?
I'm sorry, ma'am?
Is it building 3 and 5?
And 5 are the ones in question, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
5?
It's building 2 and 5.
I'm sorry,
2
2
and
and
5?
5?
I'm sorry.
Please correct the record, it's buildings 2 and 5, I apologize.
Okay, it just seems like with people living in these apartments, they're probably gonna have kids and the kids are gonna wanna go somewhere. I'm concerned about people trespassing on my property as I can't keep them off my property as it is. They're walking in the creek and taking pictures, and now it's gonna be on the other side. So I don't see how it fits in Old Town Helotes whatsoever. My concern, I think what he said is they have up to 40 feet to build a 3rd story. That's going to be way above the treetops. So people will be looking in on our property. So I would definitely have to say that I'm against it.
Okay. Any of the board members have any additional questions for Jennifer Webster?
No.
No, I don't. Thank you.
We okay? Okay. Are there any, I see nobody else here as registered to speak. Are there any other folks here registered to speak? What we, please step right back up to the mic, please. Thank you for raising your hand and helping us to stay organized.
Yes, I'm not exactly sure where he lives, but Britt Crow is a couple of places north of me, and I think he's probably with that big development right there. Yes, I think he's right there. He hasn't made it here, but I've talked to him, and he says any kind of encroachment on his property line, he's very strongly against.
Okay, thank you.
Gentlemen, any other questions for Ms. Hood?
Thank you.
Okay, since there are nobody else who needs to speak on the matter, I'll need a motion to go from public hearing to board discussion.
I make a motion to close and go to discussion.
I'll second.
All in favor? All right. Okay. Now, is there somebody here who is representing the development process?
I guess that'd be me.
Okay. Could I ask you to come forward, sir, for a second, please? And what is your name and your address, please?
My name is Nicholas Meldy. I'm the architect working with Cesar Hernandez on this development. My address is in San Antonio.
That's all right. Could you give it to us, please?
Sure,
just for the record?
318 Sadie Street, and that's spelled S-A-D-I-E.
Very good. The reason why I'm asking this question before we go into discussion, again, gets back to what I said at the beginning of our meeting. We have 4 members here tonight. Typically, the board has 5 sitting to hear a case, and you would need, if you're seeking a variance, 4 out of 5. Since there are only 4 here tonight, and again, I do apologize for that, you have one of 2 choices. You can elect to let the board hear the case, discuss the case, and make a decision, understanding that you in fact need to go 4 for 4.
Right.
Or you could ask to have your case postponed and heard when we can get a 5th member of our team available. Somebody is going to have to make that decision for the applicant. And if that's you, that would be.
I wish Caesar were here, but I will act in his stead. I mean, I've, appreciate all you guys coming in and offering feedback on and y'all's concerns about the development. I would like to address a couple of the issues that were brought up.
Please, go ahead, sir.
The development, Cesar Hernandez came to me about a year ago and had a vision for developing this underutilized piece of land in Old Town Helotes. And in doing some research, we found that the master plan for Old Town Helotes actually promotes this type of development, live-work units, and has, and the city of Helotes has been, proactive, I guess, in, it seems to us, in encouraging this type of development as well. And so, we've gotten to this point with some careful planning and, not necessarily building to max out the site or anything, trying to be sensitive to the existing trees, the site itself. We are actually planning to only take down, I think, 3 or 4 of the current trees, so the perimeter of trees around the edges will be maintained. We are adhering to dark sky lighting standards to reduce any sort of glare or brighter lights. That's not what this development's about. It's not about lighting up this this area at all. It's just about providing the very minimum of lighting out there. And as far as noise, yeah, I think it was addressed a moment ago. Most of that really comes from Flores Country Store. The businesses that are going to be in here will be the square footage of the commercial space is very small. Actually, it's there are multiple offices at under 600 square feet, and so that's relatively small for office spaces, and those will most likely be closed down around 5 or 6 o'clock. Yes, we do have 17 dwelling units. I would actually, rather than apartments, I would actually classify them as townhomes because they're all 2-story or they're located on a 2nd floor, 2 or 3-story actually in some cases. From a architectural typology standpoint, I actually would not call these apartments. They are townhomes or live-work units.
Is more?
Townhomes or live-work units.
Okay, townhomes or live-work units. Okay.
Yeah.
I apologize, I'm a bit hard of hearing.
Can you also describe the square footage of these units, please?
Sure. The square footage can you pan over? We've got like a whole list of, let's see, over to the left. We have a breakdown of each of the units. So we have a, let's see, the A units these are 3-story live-work units where we have a ground floor of commercial, ground floor business or office space, and then let's see, living room, dining room, kitchen level on the 2nd level, and then bedrooms up on the third level. And overall, the apartments range from, I think it's 750 square feet for one bed, one bath, up to I think it's around 1,000 square feet for the 2-story, 2-bed, 2.5-bath units as well.
Questions about that?
Can we go back to the actual drawing? Perfect. So we're talking about building 2 and building 5.
Right.
Correct. And what are we looking at regarding separating the property line? What's going on that property line?
And separating.
A fence, wall?
So there's currently an old cedar post. Let's see, wound wire fence along that. It's actually it's kind of like
field fencing.
the cliff line is about is my understanding of where that property line is. Not necessarily 10 feet over the cliff. I think, as was earlier mentioned, we have topographic a topographic site plan that shows where our property line is on that. And so what we have there is kind of a bit of a rundown fence on that side that's starting to deteriorate as it goes down the embankment, and then also a lot of trees. And so really, to me, the trees are kind of shielding this property from I think it's Harriet's property on the other side. And I will add that the buildings along the creek bed, we did keep to 2 stories to try to bring the height back down once we got closer to the property line over on that side.
So neither building 2 or 5 are 3 stories?
Correct, there are 2 stories. Actually, building 6 also is 2 stories down there.
So what's driving your need for a variance? Why do you want to cut the buffer in half?
Right.
Because what I'm seeing on here is you want to go from a 30-foot buffer to the property line to a 17-foot buffer,
right,
and then on one building, and then the flip side on the other one. So what's driving that?
Right. What's driving that is to not have just a dense cluster of buildings towards the middle of the property, so that we can spread out the development slightly. It's really not that big of a site. I think it's just under 2 acres, 1.7, 1.8, something like that. And so what we tried to do was spread them out a little bit, but also site them where they would not run into one of the really great oak trees that are out there. And so they've actually kind of carefully been placed and situated amongst the trees. And also the areas that we're talking about, the 17-foot areas, are actually really just corners of the buildings. It's really not a whole building. We're talking about this distance here. As you can see, the property line gets further and further away.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Over here, likewise, over on this side. There's a pinch point there, and a bit of a pinch point here. But after that, it separates quite a bit more.
Is there anything preventing the buildings from being reduced in size to meet the current requirement?
I think the need for, so what we tried to do early on, and what kind of forced the development towards the property line was the need for a driveway, a fire lane on the north side, on the top of this site plan. And so what our initial concept was to actually have that fire lane on the adjacent property and seek an access agreement from the previous owner of the adjacent property. And so instead of going through that kind of replatting bit of some legal documentation in order to have that access agreement. That's kind of what shifted everything down. But we've tried to keep all of the paving really to a minimum. And so that is a 20-foot fire lane right at the top of the site. And then also per building code, buildings need to be, I believe, a minimum of, different separated buildings on the site need to be a minimum of 10 feet apart. And then we'll still need a firewall in between each building. It's just for fire code reasons. And so that sort of separation between the buildings from the building code, as well as the fire lane at the top of the site, kind of force some of the development lower. And again, you know, we could cluster it a whole lot more, but it would mean taking down more trees, and it would also mean that some new residents to Helotes, or whoever's, you know, whatever residents are going to be there, aren't going to, you know, kind of enjoy as much open space, which is part of the reason I think that we all, or that you all have moved here and enjoy Helotes. I think we tried to bring some of that into the site.
Can I just get you to clarify a point for us?
Sure.
And that is that you could, if you chose, make some modifications and fall within the requirements for a 30-foot setback.
I think it would be more difficult with building 2, but much easier for building 5 if we were to relocate building 5. The importance of building 2 is really its edge and border along the courtyard area. We're trying to make a place where people want to come to and you know, businesses that attract residents. And so this courtyard is an important element of the design. And so having a building that kind of makes that edge, makes that border around that courtyard is important to the site plan itself. We would need to do some pretty major redesign at this point if we were to relocate building 2. But I think building 5, there's a real good possibility that we could move that to a place that fell within the zoning requirements.
Chairman, may I go through?
Please.
From
Go ahead,
staff's
Rick.
perspective. If you recall, back in 2008 and 2009, the city went through a massive comprehensive plan for the Old Town District. And within that, it called for what we call mixed use. And actually in Old Town, it does allow for apartments. It does allow for retail, for restaurants, that sort of stuff. I mean, it's essentially supposed to be an economic sort of downtown center within Helotes, but still maintain the historic sort of appeal that it currently has. So I want to say that everything about this development complies with code, with the exception of the residential buffer zone to the rear of the property. So we're not talking tonight about how the buildings look, what uses are going to go into them, the 17 apartments, all of that is allowed by code. The question tonight really is whether building 2 and building 5, the corners of them, can encroach into that residential setback by 30 feet. The conceptual design plan, which includes the site plan, the building design, signage, lighting, went before the Planning and Zoning Commission. And the Planning and Zoning Commission approved it outright, with the exception that there be some modifications to the monument signage that's closer to the shops at Old Town, but also that they lower the street lights from what they originally had planned to 16 feet, if I recall, a maximum height of 16 feet, which is quite small for a parking street light. And they've agreed to do that. They also, in their motion, encouraged the Board of Adjustment to reflect upon the Old Town plan that we have and understand that, in their opinion, that this development is exactly what we've been trying to get within Old Town Helotes for some time. And so they encouraged the Board of Adjustment to approve the variance. They have no authority to tell you that, but they tried to encourage as best as they could. When this went to the city council, because in Old Town, all developments have to be reviewed and approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission and also the city council. Normally, in the rest of the city, the commercial developments stop at the Planning and Zoning level, but this requires an additional level of scrutiny. City council did approve the entire development with the modifications that Planning and Zoning suggested, and they too encouraged the Board of Adjustment to seriously consider approving the 30-foot, the encroachment into the 30-foot buffer. Both Planning and Zoning and City Council looked at the massive 100-year FEMA floodplain to the rear of the development. Mrs. Hood's property, if I recall, has about, more than half of it is in the 100-year floodplain, the portion that stretches towards the creek. And so knowing that it's in the 100-year floodplain and knowing that no development can occur on that site, simply the city won't issue any building permits for any development in the 100-year floodplain, that they felt with not only the floodplain issue, but also the bluff that's there and the creek with all the trees, that an encroachment of 15 or so feet for Building 2 and Building 5 was reasonable given the development that they were presented with, which I think we can all agree is a nice looking development. Whether you like apartments or not, it's a nice, it's a Class A type development. So that's why we're here today. We did issue the letters and the notices to individuals within 200 feet. Several of the individuals that were here today are actually to the side of the development. Ms. Hood has a very real concern in that her development backs up to this development where the encroachment would take place. But to go back, the vast majority of P&Z and City Council were looking at the 100-year floodplain and the fact that nobody could develop in that portion of that lot regardless. And so in a sense that acted as a residential buffer between homes that are existing along Antonio Drive and the rear of Old Town where commercial development is taking place. And so with that, I'll yield back to the chair.
Thank you so much, Rick. Does anybody have any questions for Rick before?
Yeah,
Please, go ahead, Blair.
there was a discussion in this letter, in the one letter regarding the driveway access to this thing. Is that part of the variance?
No. The driveway, no. What Mr. Minea is suggesting is that, first off, the Board of Adjustment can't do anything, nor can council or city or P&Z about the access to the property. It has access through an ingress-egress easement on both Mr. Minea's property, the Holtz's property, and not the gardens. Yes, the gardens at Old Town Helotes, which is the event center that's there currently. So they have access to that. In reality, what happens here is that development projects go through the conceptual design phase. They go through any variance requests that they need, and then they submit full-blown documents. And at that point, the building official and the fire official, predominantly in this case, the fire official is the one that's driving the site plan here. If you notice, they had a major fire line to the north of that property, but they also had the circular area on there, which fire trucks don't like to stop, back up, and then pull forward. They like to have circles. And so that's what's driving a lot of where these buildings are sitting, essentially. But at that point, access and all of those things are finally determined because all developments within Old Town and within the city of Helotes have to be in compliance with the 2015 building code and the 2015 fire code. Of course, unless a variance is granted, but in this case, we're not talking about a variance to those codes. So that's.
So our discussion is only with regard to the encroachment on the setback line?
Yes, it has nothing to do with our preference to two-story, three-story, residential, commercial. We're limited here to a discussion of whether or not we should grant a variance for the setback.
But it's our understanding, for clarification, that the city won't take a position, positive or negative, regarding the entrance and exit to the property because it's a private thoroughfare now?
It's a platted egress on other plats that, that provide access to this tract. This tract has access off of Old Bandera Road, and will continue to have access off of Old Bandera Road. Now, there will need to be some negotiations, I imagine, with Mr. Hernandez, with Mr. Manea and the Holtzes regarding improvements to that access.
Okay, thank you.
Board, we've been discussing and we've been chatting, but we still need to go back to my original question, and that is, we have 4 members here tonight. And somebody needs to say, yes, we'll deal with this, and we'll run the gamut with 4 out of 4, or we need to reschedule and bring in a 5th member. Are you the person who has that authority?
That seems to be the case. You guys have a recommendation?
Do I have a recommendation? Well, first of all, why don't you come forward, just since you're speaking, and we want to make sure we get this all on tape. Sure. We are not allowed legally to make recommendations or suggestions or anything like that. Now, there are times when we've had cases come before us, and as part of sorting out the do's and the don'ts and the pros and the cons, we've said, well, how about if we can change this a little bit here or modify that a little bit there, and kind of bring all the parties together. Right. We have suggested that. Is it within our authority to do that? No. Our authority is really simple. Yes or no. And again, my concern, because you are in a situation where we have not been able to afford you the best possible service, is you have to sort out whether or not, or somebody has to sort out whether or not they want to pursue this or postpone it until we can get a quorum, which typically takes, what, about a month, Rick?
Yeah, I would suggest if he wishes to postpone it, that be done in an official motion and second, but that be done to the second meeting second Monday in June, which would be your designated official meeting date, if, of course, that's contingent upon getting a quorum, but that would be the designated day.
So I would say that since the owner of the property is not present tonight, that we postpone the decision or the vote tonight. I think he needs to be here to make that, ultimate decision.
We respect that, we understand that, and we may very well have this conversation a month from now.
Right.
And that's okay. Again, we are most concerned that justice be done, and that as best as possible, we live in harmony as a community. Mm-hmm. But we will need to get a first and a second. So given the fact that a representative of the applicant, speaking for the applicant, has requested that, given the fact that the board only has 4 out of 5, and understanding that he would need all 4 to vote in favor and not have the luxury of having 1 dissent, you request that we postpone our discussion until we can reschedule the meeting.
Correct.
Very good. And just again, for the record, since this is the real important part, your name is Nicholas Melony, M-E-L-O-N-Y?
Melde, M-E-L-D-E.
I apologize, sir, I'm a little hard of hearing.
No problem.
M-E-L?
D like David, E.
D-E. Very good. Okay, so that's your official request.
Yes.
Given the fact that we've received that official request, I guess we need an approval in a second.
I'd make a motion that we go ahead and accept the request and table this until the next meeting.
Very good.
And that would
Second?
be specifically June 11th, just for clarification.
June 11th, assuming we can get a quorum.
Yes.
And I'll second, yeah.
All righty, all in favor, gentlemen?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you so much for coming out, folks. Sometimes it takes a little longer than others, but again, it's most important that the right thing be done. thank you so much for your time. And again, I'm sorry we had to keep you waiting this evening. Lord willing, we'll do better next time. Thank you. No problem at all. Okay, our next discussion, and this will be item number 3. And folks, I'm just gonna ask you to do me a favor, please. Guys, you could, now that we're done with that section of the meeting, you're welcome to talk all you want, but we need to keep peace and quiet within here so we can proceed. Thank you all so much. Okay, so the balance of this meeting will now concern the request by Kyle and Vivian Holtz, and I will read that and just make sure we understand what's going on here, and that is item number 3 on our agenda. Public hearing to give all interested persons the right to appear and be heard on request of Kyle and Vivian Holtz for a variance to Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 98, Zoning, Article 3, District Regulations, Section 9872, Old Town Helotes Special District, exceeding the maximum allowable amount of impervious cover of 47.5% for the Holtz office building located at 14789 Old Bandera Road, Helotes, Texas, 78023, more particularly described as BCAD, property ID number 242066.
Chairman,
Yeah.
before we continue, I want to let everybody know that this item is going to involve a business that my family and I are clients of. I'm not on the board of directors. I have no executive power or anything. We're purely clients. But I do want to make the board aware of that and give the other board members the opportunity to express if it's okay if I continue on or if they would rather see me stand down.
Just to clarify, you have no financial interest in this one way or the other, no
Correct.
personal interest. You are simply a client of the business, no different than if I were to say I buy my burgers from McDonald's.
Correct, or I think a better analogy would be if this was something involving Northside School District and we had a child who was attending a Northside school.
Okay, so you might find yourself maybe selling candy for a fundraiser, but you're not part of the Northside School District.
That is correct.
Is that,
And just for clarification, because I don't think you actually said that you have a child that attends Marvelously Made,
Correct. We have a child that attends Marvelously Made.
who may or already does have a tenant relationship with the Holtzes on this new building.
Correct.
Okay.
very good.
I have no
Guys,
concern.
do you have any problem with him staying on?
I have no issue.
No issue at all? I have no issue either. So we'll continue with 4.
Okay.
And maybe before we do that, I should again ask the question for whoever is speaking to this issue, are you willing to go with our current configuration of 4 out of 5? No? Oh, I'm sorry. Who would be the person in charge? And if you could come up, give us your name and your address, please.
Ryan Plagans with Up Engineering, 1270 North Loop 1604 East, Suite 1310, San
Okay.
Antonio.
Very good. All righty. Would you like to continue to have us hear your case, or would you prefer to not?
Yes.
You would, yes, you would like us to hear your case?
Yes.
Okay, very, very good. Okay, I thank you so much for that. And I guess the question I have here, the only person I have on paper as wanting to speak to this issue was Mr. Logue, who's already spoken his piece, and we've resolved that matter. Is there any other citizen that needs to speak concerning this matter? Well, I'm going to speak and just try to simplify as best I understand the situation. There was a fire on the property. Prior to the fire, the property was kind of, I guess we'd use a term, grandfathered into Old Town Helotes. But once the fire occurred and the building burned down, legally, it's no longer a quote-unquote grandfathered in. They would like to rebuild on the property. According to the current codes for that particular piece of property, 47.5% of the area needs to be impervious cover. They already have a parking lot there, much of which didn't burn down, praise God, and would like to increase that to 60%. Is that, in summary, a fair enough discussion for those involved?
I'd ask for clarification that
Go ahead.
the existing,
Hang on just one second, let me get
thank
the name and the, okay. Could you please come forward again? I do apologize.
okay.
But we just want to get it right.
Oh, everything is correct. Just a little bit of background on
Sure.
what was there previously. It was nearly 95% covered with impervious cover. So we are greatly reducing and removing old asphalt, concrete, and anything that was there previously.
Are you, as far as square feet involved, are you trying to maintain the number of square feet of the original buildings, or?
I believe so. We're looking at 5,000 square feet from the main building, yes.
So what I'm hearing is right now, as it sits, that impervious cover stands at 90%.
At least,
And the only reason why it's there is because it was grandfathered in.
correct.
And you're actually going to be reducing the amount of impervious cover with this development from what's there now.
Exactly. We're right at 60%. And the 60% was at the recommendation of the city council or planning and zoning commission? Both. When our plat went through for review. So they approved their high recommendation was the 60%, and so we decided to run with that number at their request.
Any other questions
I'm good.
for this person? Rick, could I ask you to just give us a quick comment about how the city went through the process, the P and Z again, and also city council?
Yes, Chair. Essentially, y'all described most of it currently. I think it was, the 60% was really sort of a negotiated settlement, if you will, between planning and zoning and the Holtzes in regards to it. You know, it had 90, 95, even more, I don't know, percent impervious cover on that tract. The existing buildings were not the most attractive buildings, and the property was not the most attractive. It had been there for a long time. And so with the fire, it's an unfortunate fact that there was a fire there, but it does allow for the reconstruction of a building that is much more in tune with what Old Town, and we have the plans in here, with what Old Town looks like and is trying to get commercial developments to build to. So at that point, P&Z decided that it would recommend to the city council, who would then recommend to the Board of Adjustment, that the applicant be allowed to lower the impervious cover to an amount that they could still build their building, but also have adequate parking per the parking regulations. But it would still, unfortunately, be higher than the 47.5% impervious cover maximum that is allowed by code. And so that is why we're here, again, after going, just like the prior item, after going through P&Z and City Council, we still have to send it to the Board of Adjustment to approve, because there is that zoning restriction on that property. And so that's, again, it really goes back to sort of a negotiation between P&Z and the applicant, and then City Council and the applicant.
Board, any questions, more questions for Rick?
So do you think it would be in the public interest to allow them to proceed, to grant the variance and allow them to proceed?
Well, that's your job, Chad.
I think what he's trying to say is P and Z and city council would answer yes.
P&Z and City Council would answer yes. I can tell you that I do believe that this is a very nice development. It's certainly an improvement over what was there. And it does accomplish what the Old Town codes were trying to accomplish, and that is to minimize impervious cover as much as possible. So I do believe going from 90-something to 60% for an old piece of property is significant and is worthwhile of approval.
and it's our understanding, I mean, do we have a legal statement that can be made that it truly is no longer non-conforming. I see that it's written into the statement, but
Yeah, if it had burned down, I forget exactly how our non-conforming wording is. I think it's 60%. If it had burned down, but 60% of the structure, or a percentage, 60 or 50, was remaining, then it would still have non-conforming rights. But the fact is, the entire building was engulfed, torn down because it was uninhabitable, and so at that point, you lose non-conforming rights.
okay.
Other questions for Rick? Can I get a motion to move to discussion?
I make a motion, we
Okay.
move to the discussion.
Move to discussion?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No. Okay, who'd like to go first? Why don't I do what I usually do and start on my left and move right?
Okay, so I'm gonna start with kind of the rules of providing a variance and what we have to look at, the determination. So under state law, variance can only be granted if it's not contrary to public interest. It's due to special circumstances or special conditions. Literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship, and the spirit of the ordinance is observed and substantial justice is done. So we've already heard from P&Z that they would like to see this proceed. They don't see this as being contrary to the public interest. There are definitely special conditions, the fire, the fact that it was non-conforming originally. If we push for the 47.5, I think we would be creating an unnecessary hardship. And I think if we were to proceed with this, I think we would be observing the spirit of the ordinance. And the way I look at it is going from 90 to 60, that's a win. Thank you.
Okay.
Are the Holtzes the same owners that had the property when the fire occurred?
Yes.
It hasn't changed hands? Okay, so I would recognize then that there's an implied hardship. If they had the property they had, they could have used it with 95%. Burning down, they lost that right, except they are the same owners and haven't sold and changed hands. So I'd agree with that point. Outside of that point, though, the rules are pretty clear. If you want to build in Old Town, the rules are the rules, and City Council or Planning and Zoning recommending action or negotiating any number that's outside of the rules is outside of the rules. It doesn't make it illegal, but it sends people to us with the preconceived notion that there is some impact of what Planning and Zoning and City Council do against the rules. So in this case, I'm positive towards this piece that we're talking about, but the continued variance requests that come to us with implied positions by the city that are completely asking us to move houses or to make changes, I'd ask that we review those more carefully as a city. Okay.
I'm in agreement with, I have no questions, no further comments.
I guess my thoughts would be in total agreement with what you said. I think, if nothing else, a fire is certainly an unusual and extenuating circumstance. The overall benefit is going to accrue to the city and not from the city. It's not going to be taken from any of the residents. So I would be inclined to end discussion. And seems like since we have a commonality of thought, I'll ask somebody to make a motion.
Do we need to go and close the discussion?
I guess we do, right? Yeah, we do. All right, anybody close discussion? Anybody have anything else to say? We'll do it just to be sure.
I'll move that we
Close,
close.
okay, all in, second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, let us, get a motion then.
I make a motion, we go and put it to a vote. to approve the variance as requested.
So you motion to approve the variance as requested, understanding that there'll be a 60% impervious coverage as opposed to the 47 and change that's
0.5,
required.
correct.
0.5, thank you.
Correct.
Okay, can I get a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion is granted. You have your variance. Is there any other business that needs to come before the BOA this evening? If not, it is exactly 28, and our meeting is closed. Thank you very much, everybody.